Welcome to another episode of Women Lifting Women, a podcast dedicated to female voices in leadership and tech. I'm your host, Emma Roz. Hey guys. And I'm joined today by Aoife. She's amazing. I will let her introduce herself, but I'm super excited. Please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here, Emma. It's such a pleasure to be here and to have this wonderful conversation. As you said, I'm Aoife Spillane. I'm the founder of Aeva Health. It is basically, we're on a mission to make holistic health, integrated health, if you like, more accessible, affordable, but also more science-backed and evidence-based for women. And so what that means is we have one platform that offers a 360 solution from integrating your emotional, physical, and mental all in one place. We're trying to make it as simple as possible. And we offer a bunch of different things that I think we're going to get into. But yeah, it's based on my own personal health story. So I'm super, super passionate about this. But yeah, really excited to be here today.
Really exciting project. And I can't wait to hear more about it. But I do want to maybe to some of the people who don't know why this is so important and how much female medical I'll say research or services have been so neglected for such a long time. I would love for you to maybe give some background to how important this project solution and everything that you're doing really is, because I don't think a lot of people realize how backwards female focused medicine or female focused research around medicine has been so far. I think we talked about a great example about the seatbelt.
Yeah, I mean, there's some shocking ones. And you know what? For shock factor, I'm going to start with some crazy stats out there that I think we kind of forget that when we're in our own industry, in our own world, we kind of sit with these facts, which I think shock us a lot. So I'm going to throw them out there and kind of explain to your question as to like why the lack of, right? There is pretty much no, female health research out there, to be totally honest with you. So as you said, the seatbelt. So the seatbelt is actually made for the average male human body. Still to this day, we haven't been considered as females. And that's a really interesting point. The other thing is 50% of heart attacks are misdiagnosed because the symptoms in women and men are completely different, and therefore, unfortunately, when women come in with a heart attack, it's really hard to diagnose them. And so sometimes, unfortunately, like they can assist them, and obviously, you can imagine sometimes there's not. The results aren't very favorable. The other one is that basically 80 to 90% of the health data that's out there in 2025 is based on the male body. So there is not that much information about women. And so that's kind of where we're at today and why this matters so much. But in terms of a little bit as like the history as to like how the hell did we get here and why this is so important. And I guess it's like a huge opportunity as well as like the big challenge. And it's very much what keeps me busy on a day-to-day basis and what Aeva Health is aspiring to do. So how did we get here? Basically, in the 1970s, there was a drug that came out, and it was actually mainly in Europe and Australia, where there was a lot of women that took it, and it was for morning sickness. And so a lot of them was for morning sickness, like a series of other things. But anyway, a lot of women that were pregnant started having deformed babies, roughly like late 60s, early 70s, thereabouts. And so the US decided, the FDA said, right, we're going to just stop giving that to any women, and we're actually going to stop any women. So it was quite early in the clinical trials and so forth. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to stop any woman who's of childbearing age. So let's say anyone with a period, basically. So let's say roughly like 13 all the way to like 50, if you want to, like, it could obviously vary, but let's say huge freaking chunk of women of the population have just been excluded from clinical trials. And that didn't change until 1993. So anyway, I was born in 92. So it was basically, it's still very much, maybe it's like, so I like to think of myself as still a young chicken, but no, in all seriousness, we're still guinea pigs, right? Because even in 1993 with women, being brought into the clinical studies, unfortunately, most of them were white. Unfortunately, they didn't take into consideration a woman in a different stages of her cycles. And so the data actually wasn't very reliable and robust, and it cost the medical institutions more money to do that, because they needed to have every woman that was on that clinical trial at the same stage in their cycle in order for the data to be valid. And they didn't really realize that until quite recently. And so a lot of even though it was illegal, that they legally required to have women in there, unfortunately, there's ethnic minorities and other and many ethnic minorities that don't necessarily have the data included in that. And now we're seeing that we don't have that full suite of data included. So today, we've got like amazing tech systems, amazing AI systems, but to keep it really simple, you know, what Aeva Health is doing, we're really integrating AI and tech with health experts, so that we can actually not only bridge this huge gender health gap, but actually collect the right information and then feed it in through experts and disseminate it in such a way where we can actually start helping women today with their health and giving them insights that don't just rely on the average male body, but actually rely on the female body and all the wonders that we are and everything that we uphold. Because unfortunately, for so long, women have been seen as very, very complex beings. And I think that is a really like illustrative of how the clinical research has, you know, been over the last multiple decades, and has been labeling women as super, super complex. And unfortunately, a lot of our health issues are labeled as taboo and complicated, and you women are seen as like complaining, and there's a lot of that narrative that sits also behind that, as well as the lack of data. And so unfortunately, that's left women very confused, very overwhelmed, feeling like there's a problem with them, and you know, at sometimes like really in a big friction with their body. I very much was there, very much was there 9 years ago, and I'd say like 6 to 9 years ago, I was very much in that state of really trying to make sense of the body, of like, why is, you know, in my case, I had autoimmune thyroid condition, and my body attacking itself. And in autoimmune, women are twice more likely to have an autoimmune condition than men. We're 40% more likely to have a chronic condition than men. And because of the lack of information, the data that's out there, the medical, like our medical experts aren't able to actually help us, because it's not in many of the of their trainings. And so, you know, I was at a conference last Saturday, and I was at Imperial, and it was an amazing femtech conference. A lot of the students that either studied biomedicine, or, you know, any type of like just like medicine by itself, or any interest, they themselves were not equipped to deal with women's health as women themselves today, right? So I think that there's so many different things we need to shift. People want to, especially women, want to solve these problems because they're living in that frustration. But even when they're in the field, they're finding it difficult to get the right information and equip themselves so that they can also make a difference within their lives.
I mean, it's really hard. And I think that's even just a really simple example. Pain medication is less effective on women. Any medication has been developed, hasn't really been tested as much as robustly on women, and is less effective. I think there's infinite amount of treatments that is just less effective on women. Women are more likely to die. Same with seatbelt. The fact that seatbelt has been designed for men means that women are more likely to die in a car accident. So not just the fact it was designed for men, women, because we have a different body structure and different center of gravity, we are more likely to die. So that's the actual repercussion of that. You know, if you take medicine, it wasn't designed for you. And therefore, if you, like situation, me and my husband take the same medicine, it's more likely to work for him than for me, just because I have a different biology. And that's insane, right? Like, we think about just we are 50% of the people. However, a lot of that medicine was also developed first when women were not even allowed we're not allowed to study it. And then you have people thinking of solution to for people that look like them. We know that if only a group of men design a product, it will be developed for men and won't be suitable for women. Also in tech, that's the same happened with VR, right? The first time VR was released, women were too nauseous to use it because it didn't take it into account of what's designed for women. So that's and now that women are allowed to study it, and there are more women in the field, still there are less. And second, there are a lot of barriers. Now, with anyone who's been listening or following any news in the States for the last few weeks, maybe it sounds like we're going down even, I don't know, reversing back or reverting back. Not exactly sure what's happening there. Slightly scared to know, potentially. Every time I open Instagram, I have a mini heart attack. But that's why this is such an important and pivotal thing to do. I think what you're doing is amazing. And I'm so excited to see you succeed. But we'll start with my favorite question, even though we're halfway, we already learned so much. So start with my favorite of asking you personally, what do you think is your superpower in building this company? Could be your personal experience, anything that you think really maybe filled you, one, with passion for this, and second, maybe help you kind of make it into a success.
Great question. I think this is it's a difficult one to answer, but at the same time, it is quite simple, right? Which maybe is a great analogy for women's health, right? Yeah, I think genuinely, I think it's a gut feeling, and I think it's solving. This is the business I wish I had, not only 9 years ago when I was diagnosed, but more importantly, 6 years ago when I actually encountered holistic health and started to see the benefits. And today in remission, there is so much value. I can't emphasize that enough, to look at the woman as a whole and look at all parts of her, and how all parts of ourselves, from our gut health to our nutrition to our mental health to our hormones, are all impacting all those areas that I also just listed, in all parts of ourselves. And so I think what the system we're looking at right now is really looking at things in isolation. We have really, really good gut health specialists. We've got really good mental health support. We've got great sleep optimization. That's a lot of the data is coming out, that we can, like the wearables and everything, and that's amazing, and it's giving us a lot of insights. But it's really, really difficult for women, especially because of the lack of information out there. We're really left to kind of make sense of that, and on top of that, we're also left to basically piece all of those pieces together and then collect that to put it in one place, which also makes our life a lot more complicated. And oftentimes women don't do it because they're already quite frustrated and overwhelmed by their health anyway. And most women are, with all our hormonal changes, unfortunately, and in the environment we live in today, between microplastics, different environmental toxins, and just stress, that we're out of whack. So there's a lot to do. But to answer your question, for me, that's really like my drive behind this. But I think my superpower, it feels a bit funny saying it, but I think my real superpower is my gut instinct and my feel. And I think I learned look, I've been doing this for about 6 months. I left my corporate job about a year ago, and I took a bit of time off, and I started kind of getting curious as to how does one start a business. And I knew I wanted to do something in the women's holistic health space based on my story. And I was sort of exploring different things and taking that time to really create that. Now, I had a lot of unsolicited advice from a lot of men telling me this is how you start a women's health business. And I think coming from corporate, where everything was very structured, I was a management consultant before, and there was a framework for everything. And if there wasn't, we would make one. And I did the same. I, was going from non-consulting background to consulting, and I made a lot of frameworks in the middle to be how to be a good consultant, right? Because I was trying to make sense of it. And I think that you flow a lot on your masculine. It's very much productivity focused, output focused. And I think you can lose yourself in it. I think I lost myself in that. And I think I lost that sense of trusting myself and really listening to what felt good for me and really trusting my gut. And I think that was like the biggest thing, and this still the thing that I continuously come back to, and also have to also exercise, right? Because it's kind of easy to kind of go up even in the startup space, is to really, especially in the health tech space, is to go onto that masculine state. So for me, what's really important is coming back to what feels good for me, and that this is just as much the business I wish I had, for all the reasons I mentioned before, but also this is also a different way of women looking after themselves and looking at their health in all their beauty and in all their what is deemed complex, but actually celebrating each part of those, because they all deserve the attention and they all deserve that connection, so that women can start looking at their health and connecting it. And so for me, I think it's coming at that with, I guess, empathy and for myself, but also with others, and seeing, hearing what people are saying, meeting them where they're at, and taking what I need, and maybe leaving different bits of advice that maybe have been offered up, maybe, and not necessarily in line with what feels right for me. So I think what I'm really which is a huge shift from corporate and business life before, is really going into that, following what feels right for me and for the business and what I want to build. And that has been quite challenging, if I'm honest, because my whole career I've been in corporates and in scale ups, where I've been flexing the masculine, like flowing in like the masculine energy, which is very much productivity focused. Is like, if you can't do it, like push against it, like keep going. If you're not like, we have these times in our cycles and in our lives where we have a bit of brain fog, we're quite tired, there's just like, we're just not feeling in that creative flow state. And unfortunately, in how we're set up today, you can't take a step back and align, what you need to do in relation to how we have each as women these superpowers at different stages of our cycle. And I think going against that grain creates a lot of friction for women. So I'm really trying to come back and flow with that and embrace those superpowers that we have as women. And just one of the examples is different stages of our cycle. We're able to do different things, and really understanding that and having that understanding helps us have choices. And I think the beauty with choices is that you have that education, and then the women can decide what they want to do.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of the time we have almost made the cycle, like, I don't know if demonized, but like at least made women's cycles into something a bit shameful that we don't really talk about, that we don't like. We made women feel guilty or need to hide, and even the way that we sold the products around it and marketed. Remember that recent study showed that women's menstruation basically is an equivalent to a pain that you feel during a heart attack. And then they were like, and then we have this commercial telling us we're supposed to wear white and go play tennis and ride a horse and all of those things. And it was like, why would anyone ever want to do that in a normal situation? Definitely not when you're feeling like, why are you telling me that this is what I'm supposed to do? And clearly, this is not normal advice. So I think all of those almost internalized messaging that we have consumed since childhood, because that's what was all around us. We need to stop and question that, and kind of like that was one of the things I was curious about during this process of working in the corporate environment and then going into building your own company. And as you said, you got a lot of unsolicited advice. What were the rules or expectations that you have encountered that you wanted to challenge, maybe, and say, like, you know what, I disagree with that, thank you, but appreciate the feedback, but no thanks?
Oh my goodness, so many things. I think it was this is how we do things, and this is how it's done, and this is how you start a business. And I think I was seeking that kind of clarity and that structure. And I think one of the biggest things that I have encountered with starting a business is it is just as much, and I cannot stress this enough, a personal journey and a personal growth journey, self-discovery, even spiritual, if you like, if you're kind of that way, sort of open-minded and inclined, and a business journey. And you very much realize that the business is you, and you are the business, whether you like it or not. They're so closely connected at the beginning, right? And I think I was, quite susceptible at the beginning to thinking, right, how does one start a business? Like I'm out there with my metaphorically, like out there with my notepad saying, right, I'm ready. Anyone ready to tell me? And actually starting a business is like any leader. There's so many different types of companies with different cultures that stems from different leaders and different way of being. And I think honestly, it was just about really feeling comfortable and confident of doing things the way that worked for me, and that I felt was different to how the advice that I was getting. And it wasn't about going to an accelerator. I will not name the one I went to and I spoke to. And I just remember thinking they were so idea agnostic. And I was so clear that I wanted to do women's health in the holistic space and really integrating all different parts of a woman in one place, so she could start connecting the different dots like I had to. I was just looking at my physical health and actually looking at my mental health, looking at my emotional health, looking at my gut health, looking at, my sleep, looking at my stress management hugely, my nervous system, and taking all those different points equally together was really like what I managed to unlock and put myself into remission. And so when I remember speaking to this individual, and they said, yeah. Well, you can we're kind of idea agnostic. We're basically going to build a unicorn, and we're here. Like that's how they operate. And I think when you understand how the different, people either giving advice, like what industry they've come from, or what business type they've come from, or what they're trying to achieve themselves, like what's on their agenda, like some of these accelerators are VC backed mainly and are looking to find the next unicorn. It's a numbers game. It's like we'll invest in 20 and one of them will be the next unicorn. That's just like how it operates. And so I was kind of sitting with this, and everyone was I just remember people were like, well, so great, what's your progress, like have you done this, and what about this? And I think a lot of it was like progress that was unseen, which was quite an interesting one to sort of navigate, because sometimes productivity, especially, how do you measure a really great conversation that you have with someone that could lead to, a lot of actually future revenue from either being an advisor or a partner, or like introducing you to different people, and that's untangible productivity. But I think there was a lot of that type of conversations and internal sort of dialogue that was happening for me, and I felt a bit of pressure to start delivering on that productivity of measuring, like, well, you've been looking at this for a couple of months, what have you done, what have you delivered, like where are you at with things? And I think sometimes that's helpful, but I also think when you're trying to create something that's different, I sort of learned the hard way of, back in October, I was like, right, we're now clear on exactly what we're building, which is also funny because it's not until you actually start building it that you get more clear, and then everything iterates and evolves. But I tried to, back in October, I was like, right, I'm going to build and I'm going to market at the same time. And that was difficult, because try marketing something that doesn't really exist when you don't have something to show, And then on the flip side, it's when you're building something in the tech space, when you're bootstrapping, you've got one developer, like that takes a lot of my time and focus and making sure all the different dots are aligning. And so I had to just choose one, which also was a little bit against the grain. So I guess for me, it was just, again, coming back to what felt right for me, hearing everybody else's either unsolicited or solicited advice, taking that, but actually looking at it from a perspective of not, oh, here they are saying this again. I think it was just getting really curious as to why they were saying that, and what was it about the path that they had that made for them to believe this, and then looking at that with a bit more objectivity and perspective, which obviously came as the months went on, especially from the beginning stages, was really, really helpful. So I think that was a big sort of like trust in myself, and kind of carving your own path, and trying not to, as much as possible, let others steer you off that, but then bringing people in that can help you navigate that in the right way.
I think it's always a balance, right? It's about, you want advice and you want to listen to advice, but not all advice is good advice. And I say the same for feedback, right? Like sometimes you need to listen to the feedback, and it's okay to say afterwards in your mind, appreciate it. It's like, I'm going to put it aside because it's not actually useful. A lot of the time, or also I send things, content or something or anything like for feedback, I'll get 10 different opinions that all say something very different. Some will have some consistency there, and maybe I can consider it. There's a lot of like where people, as you said, where people background, where their strength, why they're saying it. And it's okay if I don't take everything on board. I can just listen, understand, and then decide, you know what, this is right, this is not right for me. And that's what, like, that takes a bit of courage almost, because we tend, especially, I feel like it's especially women, but in general, tend to have that, oh, they said it, they might like almost like under evaluate our own opinion or undersell our own opinion, and having all of this self-doubt of like, am I right, am I not right, and just like being able to say, you know what, this is all fine, but I still gonna stick to like what I think is correct. Not saying to stubbornly ignore reality or never to listen to other people. And if sometimes you do need to take a step back, listen carefully, and then make a decision, but do it with your eyes wide open. So even, don't remember right, but 4 years ago, still really started building the company. Well, I'm not the founder. Understand how it feels to build a company. And it's still my baby in many ways, at least this is how I feel. But one, I'm very passionate about what we do and also about the company, and I really care about it, but it means that we can have very long debates and I will not back down, because I learned to trust that if I believe something, I have to like fight for it at least, and like get to an agreement and like really trust myself. And I think that's really healthy. Not blindly, stubbornly, just not listening, but really listening and then saying, thank you, no, thank you. And I think that who taught me that is probably my parents. Not because, probably my parents, because my parents were horrible in making choices for me. So what happened is I am really scared of there are a few, like my father really wanted me to go into studying medicine. I'm a bit of a germophobic. One of the things I should not do is someone who has mental health issues around, like it scares the shit out of me, like should not put themselves in a situation where they're triggered all the time. So there was this constant recommendation which is like not right for me, and I constantly had to exercise this skill of listening to someone who is apparently more experienced than you, but saying, I appreciate your advice, I'm just not going to do it. And I remember my father telling me that I never listen, and I told him this exact sentence. I always listen, Dad, I just don't always do what you say. And I think they taught me very well that just because someone has more experience than you, that doesn't mean that they know what's best for you. And it's okay to trust what you think and choose for yourself. I'm not sure it shows, like, they're amazing parents. It's just there were, even if people think that they know best for you, doesn't always mean that it's right.
Completely. And I think what's really interesting is I think I'll throw a little stat out there, right? So I was at this amazing women's business event at the beginning of this year, and do you know what? Shout out to Female Founders Rise. If anyone is wanting to, it's a great community to be part of. It's super, super collaborative. And they put on this event with Google, and I was there, and I just remember I heard it there, and I heard it someone else. Someone was saying that basically, apparently, women, when they were doing the financials, they would, I think, basically cut their projections in half and would do the opposite. And so what would happen is that because, unfortunately, I think it's about less than 1%. I need to maybe fact check that. But it's between 1% to 2%, right? I think it's less than 2%. That goes to VC funding goes to women, and as you can imagine, within that, there's not very much diversity within the women, unfortunately. And so most investors see male projections, and they half them because they think, oh, that's a bit ambitious, we're going to half it. So then women come in and have already halved them because they are trying to be realistic, and then they half them again, and then they think, okay, like that's not a really great investment for me to be in because they've already halved the And I think that's a really, really, really interesting example to kind of showcase.
I do the same. So I remember my finance were like, Emma, you're really, for a salesperson, I was like, one, I'm not I run commercial. So I care about accuracy, not about I'm not going to blow up numbers. But I find it with salespeople all the time. Women tend to be a lot more conservative. I do the same. Please.
But I'll also tell you something, is that there was a study that came out recently that said that it was more fruitful to invest in women leaders, especially in businesses, because there was more longevity to it. And so there was that foresight about making decisions that was maybe less reactive, or less sort of immediately to how do we make the most money now in the next couple of years, sell the business, move on. But actually it's like, how do we sustain growth? How are we investing in value for customers? How are we maintaining that? It was a whole different perspective. And it was really interesting. There's a lot of studies that are coming out on that. And I think that's also helping with, showcasing the different skill set and where we kind of come in business as well. So yeah, I'm also realizing I never finished my story about the accelerator thing. So maybe for those listening, the story was just that when I went to speak to this individual, they said, right, they were ID agnostic, and I thought, okay. And I said, well, how many women do you have on average in your cohort? And they said, oh, I think it's like 12 to 15%. And I was thinking, what are the chances that I'm going to meet, another person, whether it's a female or not, that would be interested in women's health, that would be interested in starting this? And maybe they would have been, I don't know. But it was just a really interesting, that was just to kind of finish my previous story of just saying, I think it's just interesting navigating that, where, finding other allies on this is so important. And having people that believe in you, but also respect your view, is similar to what you were saying as well. And I think this is also something that I'm looking at and have been looking at, is getting the right, advisors, partners, whoever your team members that want to support you and support the vision and trust that, it's a collaborative effort, but also believe in that, that direction that you're kind of taking people on. And I think that's really important. And not to bring in people just because they have experience or because you feel like they know more. I think it's quite detrimental to the business, to the founder, to your time, to your energy, in any sense, whether you are starting a business, have a business, or anything. Maybe just also in the workforce, although it's a little bit less difficult to kind of pick and choose in the workforce, I understand. Having people that challenge you is great, but people that create constant friction and that can lead to self-doubt, or that just leads to a lot of time that's dealt managing and massaging egos and going through that, I think that's also been a really interesting experience. I think that I've also sort of experienced over the last couple of months as well.
I think it's just finding people that believe in the same vision you have, that really want this to succeed. I think that with my husband earlier, I think that where I see it happen all the time when this discussion comes, he always says that film don't come with a warning. So he's a film director, he makes film. Film is a collaborative art. And whenever you release a film, the film has to be, you want it to be amazing, and you have to get all of these people to believe and want this to be as amazing, because in the end of the day, if it's not, you can excuse, oh, this one person wasn't really interested. You can't give any excuse to the final thing. So you want, and it's super important that everyone is really passionate about it and really want to make it for it to succeed. Last year, we released the first film that I produced, and I guess that's where kind of this experience come of how much you have to care about the final, for this to come out and believe in it. And obviously startups are the same, and I feel a lot of my experience in working in a startup and releasing anything have a lot of overlap. At least that's what I feel. And I think that that's also connected to how you get the right people on board, regardless of what you do. Having people that care and believe in what you do and want the best for it will mean that they have the right intention. Even if they challenge, they still have the right intention, and therefore it's much more useful. If you have people that come in and it's personal, it's about their own success or about their them winning rather than the business winning, then it becomes a real friction, because the goal, the aim is not the same.
Completely.
And the motivations are everything.
Completely. And I think it's so easy as women to kind of feel like we don't necessarily know as much, or we're not able, we need these different characters to come on board. And yes, it is about collaborating, and you need, not one person can succeed on their own. Yeah, I really, really believe that, right? But can they be the driver? Yes, but I don't think they, like you everyone plays a role. But I also think as women, we're often led to believe and to think that, we need other, especially male counterparts to be on that. And sometimes, whatever gender they are, we need other, experts and other people to kind of be on that journey with us. But, I've heard multiple different stories, and I don't want to feel like I'm VC hating right now at all, genuinely not. But I have heard different stories about women that I've met that have said, come back when you have like a male co-founder, or when you have this, that, and the other. And I think, I think we are going through an evolution in business. And I do think what's going to happen is, just like women's health and just how we're operating, I think women are, and I feel very strongly about this, is that equality doesn't mean copy and paste man's body, how we operate, how we think, or like how just in general we are to the female, and then ask them to perform at the same level. Equality is really about how do you embrace all aspects of each gender, celebrate both of them for the different, values that they both bring, and how do we then shape a system and environment around both of them so that they can both succeed, and also having that understanding of both genders and how they operate. And I think it's starting to happen. I really do, with the whole sort of women's health, femtech movement that's, and especially the increase in investment, like there's definitely things happening. I think there's more that needs to happen, but it's definitely happening and moving in the right direction. But I also think there's an education that I think, firstly, from a medical, but also a women's perspective, that needs to be brought in so that women can understand what's going on in their bodies, in themselves, and then also that can be disseminated to our medical environment, our institutions, and the people that give us the medical support, and really look at that, and then also educate the other gender so that both genders can understand how each operate, and look at that not as a complexity but as a real beauty.
I mean, I think that when it's just like it's too complicated, it's a bit of an excuse. But I think that hearing that this is getting better is already really reassuring, and I'm really happy to hear it. So good news are always great. Always useful and happy and good and reassuring, because progress is amazing. The fact that we still have a long road to go, I think that will be forever, no matter what. The goal will always be, we will always, it will take us a while. And also the concept of equality it's not a complicated one. It's just perceived differently by different people. And I think that more and more we're talking about, equality does not mean, as you said, copy paste, or you need to be identical. Rather, it can be different and still equal. And what does that mean? And of course, as work, especially in the work environment, workspaces were designed for men, and then women kind of were superimposed. We're trying to kind of shove a square pot ring of basically a round peg through a square hole, or something of that sort. We're trying to basically fit something that doesn't fit into it, and therefore we feel uncomfortable and we feel that we don't really belong. That's because we don't. So that's why we're filling it, and that's why we're I mean, probably one of the reasons that women do feel more of imposter syndrome is because we keep trying to shove us into a system that was not designed for us, and therefore we struggle with it, shockingly. Um, so all of those things are kind of self-professing property. We're basically created a situation of like, how did it happen? But
Well,
it is what it is.
you know, there's like there's a shocking stat, right? I feel like I'm coming out with all the shocking stats, but it's in the workplace. So the actual temperature of the building is aligned for the male body, right? Which is often why women are often freezing.
Yeah.
In the offices, because it's, I think, 2 degrees lower than the ideal temperature for women. So yeah, I think it's just
Everything.
I think it's just really interesting, because I think it's good to kind of add those little stats in there, because people say, oh no, like that's not true, like how can you say that? But unfortunately, you know, it's still the case. And so I think you're absolutely right. And also congratulations on you're the film director, like directing your film. That's amazing. Sorry, I was a bit late congratulating you, but
no, it's all right. I mean, I produced it and directed, Zane directed, we co-created it. We will do our next one soon. There are a few projects in development, but it was a really great learning experience for me, because it was a bit of a different industry for me to kind of put myself into. And of course, he's extremely supportive and an amazing partner. When we come from a very different background, but we somehow are very similar in many ways. And he doesn't really fall into gender rules, and neither do I. And that's why probably we can live quite harmoniously, because we don't try to force each other into this like corner of what we're supposed to be. That's why maybe my question about how you redefined or challenge expectations and rules, something I can really relate to, and I'm really curious, is I had to do it a lot, and we still do it, and we as a couple do it in many levels, as we are probably doing a few shocking things that we will discuss probably another time, just because we made different choices. And it's great when you find someone who can support that, but it's obviously not easy. And it's not always easy even to your family to accept it and your environment to accept it, because it's not something that seems normal. Now, something too shocking, but even just, I heard like a stat yesterday, shocking stat, that women that work full-time jobs on average do 5 hours more of housework than their partner. I don't. I look at myself and I say, I really don't. We definitely do a lot more equal. The rest goes to Elenita, who is part of the family and comes and clean the house. She's probably very disappointed that my dog is not there today. And he cooks almost every day. Maybe I do the dishes, but he vacuums. And like I can't say that I do like some things. Okay, I'll do the laundry because it's really bad at doing laundry for some unexplainable reason. But it's kind of divided, and it's not this really clear that I can say that yes, I do more. I don't, which I really appreciate. Just like from everything, and like seeing and appreciating me and seeing everything I do, and I'm really appreciating that. That's for me shouldn't be remarkable. It is, but shouldn't be remarkable, because that should be normal. However, in our society, apparently it's not. So I really do appreciate him as a partner, because he is a partner. Because we are not the same, but equal.
yeah.
And that was really important for me. Fairness is really, so if something is unfair, I get really upset. And I tell them, like, I get really upset about fairness. So if it's not fair, you're making me do more, it's not fair, and therefore I'll be very upset with you for the next, so therefore we must be fair. But it sounds like you had quite a journey, and we don't have a lot more time, but I am really curious of what really changed for you that enabled you to go kind of into your power, and step into that and believe in yourself, because it's not easy to do.
Yeah, no, it really isn't. Well, first of all, thank you. And second of all, I agree. Having a partner that they support you and that looks different every day, and it's not like super defined. I think is so important, and I feel very lucky to have one as well. But also, he also doesn't like doing the laundry, which is also like, I don't know what is this about these men. But he does do a lot of the cooking, which is lovely. But we share that, we do share it. Well, we're starting to share it a bit more. I like to get this on record because he thinks he does it more. But anyway, more of the cooking.
We will send him a clip of that.
Exactly, right. We need to get that on video.
Absolutely.
And no, but yeah, coming back to your question, I think a couple things, right? I think when I was diagnosed, my my GP based in Belgium, where I grew up, so I was very, very, very sick, very debilitated by my autoimmune thyroid condition called Hashimoto's. And I was 24 at the time, and I wasn't able to function. I couldn't really get up. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't do anything. I wasn't bedridden, just to kind of clear that up, but I was really, really sick. I couldn't really operate. I couldn't work. I couldn't do any of like the basic things that we would kind of take for granted every day. Finally got diagnosed a couple of months later. My GP that diagnosed me could count. She said I could count on one hand the number of people I've diagnosed that are this bad in their thyroid. She's like, I don't know how you've been living, because this is really bad. So I started like identifying myself. Then I went to go and see a series of different health experts, and luckily Belgium is really, really good when it comes to healthcare. And I saw some of like top endocrinologists and was trying to make sense of all of that. And I was, you know, and they'd see the report and they'd look at me and they'd say, like, this is a lifetime, like we're going to increase your medicine again, and we're going to do this. And that's right, you start internalizing that.
Yeah.
And you start believing that, and you start acting like part of my identity sick, was really, really chronically sick. And that became my identity. And that was at the time I didn't realize how impactful that was. It might seem very, very, very small to some. Me at the time, it did as well. But right now, when I think back, I think that was like a really, really core element, because your behavior, your thoughts, your actions, everything aligns with you being like that. And I remember when I asked, like, you know, what could I do? What was in my power? Could I eat differently? Do I need to work out at different times? And what do I need to do? And Emma, just to show you, like at one stage I was eating salads for breakfast, which wasn't fun. And I was also on a thyroid medicine that derived from pigs, right? Because apparently, you know, it worked really well. So I tried everything and anything. And I remember at one stage, my grandmother at the time, she had, I had more pills than she did, right? And I was on steroids, everything. So, you know, I think it's like when I could go back to work and I could kind of go back to living somewhat of a normal 20-something-year-old life, I had my like pills, you know, on the table, and I try and take that. So I think you're a constant reminder, and you start really identifying that. And the reason I say that is because that's sort of the point A that I was working on. And to understand that, I think understands what really propelled me to start the business. 3 years ago, I got into holistic health a little bit unknowingly, right? My mission there, my intention there was really, how can I start reducing my symptoms? And the 6 pillars of Aeva are the 6 things that I do and that I look at all the time. Just as a side note, we do make it a lot more simplified and easy. People don't have to do 6 pillars at a time, because we understand that that's impossible. Just want to put it out there. But it's like, if you're building a house, you'd want to make sure it was on a solid foundation, not on like a sandy, rocky, you know, moving foundation. And I never believed at the time that I could ever be sitting here saying to you that I'm in remission and that I'm off all my medication and off everything, and never, like, you know, haven't had more energy and feeling really, really empowered. And I think when you see that shift, you have to start shedding that identity and really believing something bigger and greater. And I think when you start flexing that muscle, you start looking at like, well, anything is possible, you know? And I really I was in corporate before, and I think it has its pros and cons. I learned a lot. I definitely didn't feel like many of the assets that I had, my talents, how I was operating, really aligned to that. And I think that was similar to what we just discussed about it being very designed for the average male, and really like operating in such a way. And I was really unhappy there, right? And I was really unhappy, and I noticed that my body was, I could just feel like friction and not feeling so good.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I take space going on holidays or other things that I would start feeling more like myself, and my health would, really align. So it was a combination of being in that state, but also when I realized that, right, I need to help other women that are going through this and going through the pain, the frustration, the overwhelm, the exhaustion of trying to make sense of something, either being told your bloods are fine when they know that they feel like that there absolutely isn't, or when the doctors are trying to piece this together and they don't have the data and the tools to answer these questions. And so the women are often left trying to make sense of it themselves. And I just know how painful that is, and how much you kind of carry when you feel like your body's acting against itself, that you're the abnormal, and it's psychologically like quite detrimental after a certain time. And so it was a combination of all of that I thought, right, I need to shake this up, because it wasn't the right job for me. It wasn't helping me thrive and feeling good and feeling in my power, and having really been able to shift my health around really showed me how much you can shed this identity and shed this label of you being sick for the rest of your life, and doctors being so shocked having seen your results, and it was going to be for the rest of your life, and you could risk having more conditions because that's just the reality when you have them. And then thinking, right, enough is enough. Either have to do something about this for myself, for others. And the fact that I was able to turn things around for me meant I was like, I have to help other women. So that's, I think, really where the strength came. And then I think it's just been a constant sort of evolution since then, where I think I then fell back into, right, how does one start a business? And very much open to being guided and thinking there was like one way to do something, or to start a business, and realizing that there's infinite amounts of way to start a business, and kind of like really treading that path. And then I was doing a part-time role, and I left that at the end of September last year, and I was just like, right, let's go, let's do this. I was really clear on what that looked like. And so I think it was a combination of different things, and the combination of this was the business I've always wished that I had, and that did not exist, both being really, really sick, but also in remission. And I think that just showcased like the huge gap in the market. And then I started doing my research and speaking to other women, and everyone was saying, we need this.
I agree.
So that also fueled the fire and helped me get to where we're at now.
I think holistic medicine is in general something that we, like, the Western world doesn't always look into as much for all humans. I think for women is another gap, because there's also, even Western medicine is not as evolved for women, so it just becomes this layers of complexity. I actually was introduced to holistic medicine probably when I was a late teenager, through my parents. Again, parents did an amazing job. My father got sick, and we were trying to find a solution for him, and I was with him on this journey of trying. I would just go with him to be supportive, and I was 15 perhaps, and trying different, as you said, different food and diet, like trying different things, and I would just do everything with him. So when I got sick later, and I got sick when I was 18, I was already somewhat more informed, and then like went on this journey myself. So it never got as bad, thankfully. But I also can relate to what you're saying in terms of how much this becomes part of your identity almost on your everyday, and the power that is of like trust, trying, having faith or believing that you can change and the steps that you can take, and how much it can propel you in a different direction, and sometimes to something that looks impossible. So Doctor Strange is not impossible, maybe not exactly like that, but still, sometimes impossible can be curable. Something that you think is incurable can be cured, just maybe very differently than what you expect. And last, I want your question. For your question, and I think that's also really useful for anyone listening, any women listening, any 3 tips that you can give for female health that you would recommend based on your experience.
So I think this is really helpful, right? Because I think it's really all good kind of talking about this and the great strides that we're making forward. And there's still that lots that we need to do. But I think, and this is kind of what I believe in. It's what also Aeva Health is. It's like, help meet women where they're at and help them with one thing today, right? Because otherwise you're going to have a laundry list of different things to do, and you're still left feeling like you're constantly not doing it. So let's keep it really, really simple. Of course, there's loads, and I mean loads more that we could do. But unfortunately, because most women, our hormones are imbalanced, right? And that's basically because we mostly have cycles every month, and there's so many other things that are going on in our bodies that we're more prone to having this, plus with different environmental elements. We have a lot of hormonal disruptions in our body. So just be mindful, I'd say, of a couple of things. Try no phones before roughly an hour before bed and a half an hour when you wake up. And that is just purely what we're consuming. And essentially, whatever you're consuming just before bed and when you wake up. So half an hour, it gives you roughly enough time. When you wake up, the door to your subconscious, which is directly linked to your nervous system, is more suggestible. So if you start consuming Instagram, or if you're starting listening to like really like negative news or so forth, your body starts, going into overdrive. And especially as us women, I think it's important to try and keep our nervous system to preserve it in as much as sort of a balanced state as possible. So just be mindful of those things. They're quite simple. So it's kind of breaking a habit, right? Once you break it, it's pretty easy to implement, and you will see like the way you think, you'll feel sort of more confident, more empowered. If you want to put some quick tip, if you want to put affirmations on in the morning, try and put them on in the first half an hour. If you haven't consumed, like, don't look at your emails, don't look at anything that is going to start, feeding that. If you do affirmations, or if you want to do self affirmations, that's the time to do it, because it will be a lot more effective. Just as a quick tip. The other thing is try and get sunlight in the morning first thing, because even if it's 2 minutes where you just pop your head out, even if it's, unfortunately, in the UK where we live is quite grey, just getting any kind of sunlight, natural daylight, will help us sort of kickstart your metabolism, our circadian rhythm, and will actually help you sleep better the following night. So then the third thing I would say is try and be really, really, really mindful with the stresses that you put on your body. And that can either be from high intensity workouts. So the first 2 weeks of our cycle, that's when you can try and eat like a little less carbs. Don't cut them out completely. You ramp up the carbs at the last 2 weeks of your cycle. And we tend to kind of slow down a little bit. Yeah, I feel like I'm giving more than 3, but I think the last one is...
Go for it.
I think with that is like trying to kind of keep the cortisol at like as much as an even keel as possible. And so having, coffee, or, having coffee on an empty stomach in the morning can really start you on quite a high cortisol, curve. Mm-hmm. And like anything, the way I like to think about it is if you are on a roller coaster, you come down after, right? So like as high as you go up, you also have to come down. And that's the same with the coffee, but it's not necessarily the coffee, although there's a lot that I could say about that. It's more about your cortisol. You start your day on like a high stress mode, your nervous system is overdrive, your body kind of goes into that fight and flight, and we're not necessarily able to have cell regeneration and all of the natural sort of body function. So I'm really, really simplifying it massively, but hopefully that's a starting point. If anyone has any questions, obviously feel free to reach out. And I would really love to offer a discount code to your lovely audience. So I guess we'll pop that in the show notes.
Absolutely, send it over. Or if you have anything, please let me know. And if you have any questions, of course, we will connect. I would love, I want to try it for myself now. So I will be the first one to try it, and then everyone else can. Exactly. I've already, note to self, start drinking coffee first thing in the morning. I admit it. I do the same. One thing I'm good at is not looking at news or things first thing in the morning. I'm really great at, mostly because I do suffer from anxiety. Therefore, I know that I don't need any additional stress from the outside world. So I start with things that will make me happy and end with things that will make me happy.
That's lovely. So if you added in affirmations first thing in the morning, they would be really powerful for you.
I will definitely try it.
Okay, quick coffee tip with if you, the coffee drinkers. Literally have some Greek yogurt in your fridge. Take 2 spoonfuls of that, maybe 3 spoonfuls of that, and then have your coffee. Like if that's like if you can have food and have your coffee right after, that's better. Like if you could wait, that would be even better. But if you can't, then just make sure there's something in your stomach, because that won't spike your...
I will. That's literally what my husband does every morning. Greek yogurt with nuts, and then I will just have the Greek yogurt. We always have some in our fridge because it's us. We add yogurt to everything. I did make him, so we had to compromise. He met me, I was vegan, and he was not. He was on the other side, and we had to slowly come more into the middle until I became pescatarian, and he's now mostly a pescatarian, and somewhat we're kind of like between vegetarian and pescatarian. So yeah, that's compromise for you, and that's kind of like also things that help me a lot. I still will not eat meat. Also part of my health, I had a lot of digestion issues. Somehow I have a dog that has all of the problems I have biologically. Not sure how I gave birth to a dog, but yes, here we are. So we have a lot of digestion issues in our family. And we have to be a bit careful about what we eat, and we have to be a bit mindful. And that's why maybe food is something that I think about, or I got used to forming really a lot of habits of, like, for example, eating a lot of different type of vegetables, eating very diverse food, all of those things, of really working through gut health, and that's part of mine. Still a few bad habits. Coffee is one of mine. I did reduce the amount of coffee, but coffee first thing is still something I need to work through. So 3 spoonfuls of yogurt, I heard that. I will report back.
I'm excited. Like, honestly, yeah, keep me posted. I love this kind of stuff. Like, I geek out on I just really love just having small little things that you can help you just today, so you don't feel like you're going off with this huge new nutritional plan. You have to clear all your cupboards, and you have to kind of start off again from fresh. And I think those kind of things just are so much effort, and they're just not sustainable.
I've done it a few times in my life, to be honest. Every time you get this really big, it feels just so overwhelming. And most of the time, now, have everything has to change, and it's really hard, and I've mostly ineffective. And then slowly learn to listen to my body a lot more. I guess that's why I naturally tend to eat differently during different times of the month, because I'm less hungry or more hungry, and I eat when I'm hungry, based on how hungry I am. And I know that I will be different level of hungry every day, especially during the months. You'll have period of spike hunger, and yes, now I need candy, and some periods when I no, not interested at all. So it's learning for me. It was learning to listen to my own body a bit better. Not everyone do that. Obviously you need, like, some people work differently or learn differently, so I think we all have a different journey with our body, but if we're compassionate to it, it will be compassionate towards us.
Yes, 100%. And I think, I think sometimes, when you're in, from our situations, right, being sick and being in that really painful place, right? Either, and I don't mean just physically, I mean just like you feeling really lost and you're, you know, I was at least like hating a bit on myself, thinking like, why is this happening to me? How come? But now I think it's about looking and thanking your body and saying like, thank you so much for highlighting this, because I've now got to the root cause of what was causing that. And that's helped me manage so many different parts of myself, of my health, of my mental health, my emotional health, of looking at all of the different elements. And I'm stronger for it now. And I think changing that perspective of thanking your body for showing you, I think it's just healthier to be in. It's a really small sort of mindset and perspective change, but I think it's a really, really powerful one. And that's stuff that we can start looking at and getting curious as to why are these and why, you know, why is this kind of coming up, and like really getting curious about it in a really healthy way to understand more. And as you said, everyone's really different. And I think something that you said that I really wanted to add to was women's bodies, as we said, have been really, really labeled as super complex. But what's really quite amazing, what's coming out now, is what was previously like menstrual blood and menstruation, very, very taboo and very difficult for women to talk about. And nobody really wanted to. I mean, if you ask for a tampon, or if you spoke about different parts of your body, or people would sort of whisper that and say, oh, that's not the right time to talk about it. And although I understand, there are moments that are just for anybody to talk about, right? Not necessarily the right one. But I think what's really, really amazing, what's coming out now, is that there are studies that have been done on menstrual blood, and there's a huge indication as to the health of the woman. And so I think what I like to think about when I hear these things is, wow, we have so many more tools to indicate to us when we can really check in with that, and understand that, and that is also going to come with us bridging this gender health gap, getting more research and science into, and curiosity in a positive way into women's bodies and what works, and looking at all women's, the whole women. I can't tell you how many people have said to me that I have a women's health business, and I can't tell you how many have said to me, are you hormonal or gynecological? Are you dealing with which area are you dealing with? And I was like, well, there's a lot more to a woman than just that. And although those elements are super important and definitely something that we look at, there are so many other elements, right? And we cardiovascular, like heart attacks look different in women. And also I heard that ADHD, it's different, right? And so
from pain perception to the way that our brain works, our brains are wired differently.
Yeah.
That's what most brain research, I think there's brain research, it was done on 500,000 brains or something of that sort, and show that women and men, the way our brains are wired is fundamentally different. Mm-hmm. And we think differently. So a lot of things are different besides just the fact that we have different reproductive tools. But that's what we are led to, like, that's the whole difference between equality and the same. We can be equal but still different. And yeah, I don't know, I think that's kind of says it all.
100%. And I think what's really interesting is what's coming out now is that we have so many, just on the menstrual blood, right, is that is a huge indication as to the health of the woman, right? And we're still catching up with all the data and the research, but there is research that's happening right now. And so you could potentially argue that women have a lot more regular insights into the health of their bodies if we can just leverage the science and the data behind it, so that we can get really, really robust information out there and tools that help us. So there's some really cool like things that I'm seeing that are coming through, where like, you know, a tampon or a sanitary towel could actually be embedded with different, you know, technology to help us, you know, determine the health of our bodies. And that I think is really, really amazing, because we're then turning this taboo, you know, stigmatized and just like heavy topic that we're feeling that we should be ashamed about into something that, you know, is almost like a power and a superpower for us to have that direct insight into what's going on internally. So yeah, I think that's really, really exciting. And I just wanted to share that because I'm confident and excited about all of the changes that are happening, and the evolution in women's health.
That's one fascinating and also really exciting. I can't wait to see this come into reality and what will come next for women's health. And I think that's also a wonderful note to close on. Very hopeful to believe in a better future. So thank you so much, Aoife. Like, this was such a pleasure. I really, really appreciate the time. And thank you so much for everyone listening. So thank you for joining us for another episode of Women Lifting Women. For this episode and many more, please go to www.womenliftingwomen.io, and please round of applause for Aoife for being a wonderful guest. So thank you so much, and I will see you all soon.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.